Okay, it looks like things are leveling off. So I'm just going to grab my other device and begin to introduce myself and everyone else. So good morning, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar, Navigating COVID-19: The Future of Tourism and Hospitality. And we have experts with us today. So thank you all for joining us. My name is Patrick Sullivan, and I'm the President and CEO of the Halifax Chamber of Commerce and your host today. Today's webinar is about the future of tourism and hospitality. And I'm very much looking forward to this conversation because we all know how important tourism, hospitality, and that sector is to our Nova Scotia and Atlantic Canada community. Our guests today are all experts in their fields who've graciously agreed to join us for this conversation. I shouldn't oversell the experts, I guess, but we'll make that judgment at the end of the webinar. But we have many questions already submitted, so we'll go through those. But if any of you have questions, please submit them. You'll see a Q&A section. I'm just moving to it, a Q&A section at the bottom of your screen. There's also a chat, but do use the Q&A section. That way everyone can see your questions more easily. Okay, let me introduce our guests from the Department of Business Administration and Tourism Hospitality Management from Mount Saint Vincent University, one of the best universities in, of course, the world. And I'm not only saying that because I'm a graduate. We have Paulette Cormier, an assistant professor and tourism program coordinator. We have Maria Matthews, also an assistant professor, and Dr. Candace Blayney, an associate professor. You'll note that I didn't go through their long and detailed bios in order to provide as much time as we could for all of us to ask questions and go through some of the questions that we have available. So thank you very much for joining our special webinar today. Thank you all, and sharing your expertise with us. I won't be asking the questions kind of directly of any one of you, but I would love it if, as I ask the questions, people just jump in with responses. Or if you have something that you'd like to add or build on someone else's answer, please don't hesitate. So thank you very much for joining us, Candace, Paulette, and Maria. Nice to see you all this morning. So I'm going to start out with a question right away, and that is, how will consumer purchasing trends change, or have we seen consumer purchasing trends change in the last little while, given the pandemic that is upon us, both nationally and internationally? And what kind of impact do you think we might see on accommodation, restaurant, travel, or tour operators? So basically the travel and hospitality sector. So I will start, I will name one of you, I guess, just to start this, but then we'll kind of work our way around. So Candace, I'm going to start with you since you're at the top of my screen, if that's all right. And what do you think of consumer purchasing trends changing?
Thank you, Patrick. First of all, thanks for inviting us for this webinar. That question about consumer purchasing trends is a very large question. And if we can really drill down into that and start to understand how those trends are changing, what has changed, then businesses would really be able to make better decisions on marketing, communication, and ways of really reaching their consumers. So we've been in this pandemic for a long time, where people have started to really use new behaviors. And of course, that purchasing behavior, the big one we have is online purchasing. That's become such an important one. Digital shopping, we're used to now looking at information online that is just at our fingertips. So, just as a statistic, in United States, they did a survey, and 40% of their digital market is now new purchasers. So people that have never used online before are now using it incessantly for just about everything that they can think that they will need. Of course, safety is a big issue. Consumers will be very concerned about safety where they go to have business, where they go to shop. And there's a new term out there called in-homing. Years ago, we called it cocooning, where people would stay in their homes and watch TV and order out and do all of that because of Canadian winters usually. But now we've seen in-homing. You know, people are cooking at home, working from home, so they're creating as comfortable an atmosphere and a place as they can. So, you know, gym equipment, people may not be going back to the gym anymore if they've ordered gym equipment at home. So in-homing is kind of one of those terms that we need to understand. I'm going to let my colleagues kind of, there's a couple of other major ones that I'm going to let them talk about also.
Sure. Who would like to jump in next?
Paulette can go next.
Okay.
So I guess our next point would be on brand loyalty. So customers have had an opportunity to sample some other brands through this experience. So we had, for example, restaurants, you know, certain restaurants were open or more accessible for takeout and delivery and that sort of thing. And if people wanted to participate in that activity, they might have had the opportunity to try new things. So this has given people an opportunity to see what's out there, and there may be some new brands that are also emerging. You know, when they couldn't go to Starbucks, for example, they might have used a home coffee, or maybe they're buying these products at the grocery store, going to the retail outlet itself and buying the products and taking it home. Economics as well is something to consider. So there might be some spending cuts that have happened for people. Maybe credit's going to become less available. So the purchase of large items such as cars, for example, might be more limited. So discount retailers might be popular, and this might be something that our tourism industry people might want to consider as well. Maria, I'll let you.
Okay, I think something that we are seeing is the new partnerships that are, you know, those opportunities that are coming out of this pandemic. Those who cannot possibly make it on their own are looking to partner to create a feasible enterprise. So high demand retailers like Costco and Walmart and Amazon obviously will not be impacted, but we are seeing it in our sector. To give you an example, we have boat tour operators in a typical small community that would be, instead of both vessels going out, they decided to pool their resources, use one vessel and partner it as a boat tour to the area, and share those resources and share hopefully some of the revenue that may be generated during 2020. So that's an example of partnerships. And of course, the last one is, it is a major disruption to all businesses. And I think one thing about the consumer purchasing need is, I think we all realize that it's not going to be the same again. I think typical purchasers are now using other ways of purchasing. So we're seeing a whole mix of traditional and non-traditional, and I think it will continue as the new normal, I'm thinking.
Yeah, it's interesting. You know, I did a podcast recently with Heather Rankin, who owns Obla D Wine Bar, and Obla D began a take-home charcuterie plate. So while they were unable to have people in the restaurant, they began to open to allow takeout and delivery for their charcuterie plate with a bottle of wine. So they were sending this all over the greater Halifax area. And now that they've moved back into the restaurant and people are able to continue to come to the restaurant again, they're going to keep doing this. So they'll maintain this business, and although, well, up until recently they were only able to have 50% of the people in the restaurant, they've now got greater than 50%, but they still don't have the same number of people coming into the restaurant that they had before, but they're offsetting some of that revenue loss with this new line of business. So I guess maybe I'm kind of setting that up a little bit. You know, can we expect individuals to individuals, not so much the restaurants or the hotels, but can we expect individuals to jump back in? We've now reopened in Nova Scotia, or almost reopened in Nova Scotia. Should we expect people to jump right back into the behaviors they had before?
Patrick, I think it depends on your consumer. And, you know, we tend to have a couple of different groups of people. We have those that are probably going to be very comfortable to go back. We'll have those that are on the other end of the spectrum, still very not comfortable going back because maybe there's other issues, young children at home, people with compromised health conditions, etc. So any business probably, you know, has to ensure safety as much as possible, and still be able to try to manage those two different groups of people. So it's really good example that you talked about with restaurants and takeaway and delivery is, you know, if businesses can satisfy both those types of customers, then I think they'll, you know, they can subsidize, as you mentioned, that revenue to try to keep things, the revenue increase up as much as possible.
And Paulette, maybe I'll ask that question a little bit differently. I mean, is there something businesses should be doing to find kind of new ways to market their services?
I think that really letting customers know what their options are certainly is important. Making sure that it's very clear on their web pages and their social media, and we'll get into that a little bit later as well in some of the questions. But I think it's very important to let customers know what the options are. If you have takeaway available, you know, make sure that they can find that information easily. If people can dine into your operation right now, then that they need to know that as well, because there's some organizations that have not yet opened their doors fully, or maybe they're still doing the takeaway that at one time had allowed customers to come in. So yeah, I think just sharing the information as to exactly what it is that you're doing and what's available to them is a really good way to communicate that.
Yeah, I know that when I was, before restaurants reopened, when I was trying to find restaurants that were open, some of them hadn't updated their websites. Some of them weren't clear about whether they were open, whether they were closed, whether they were doing takeout, whether you could eat in, and of course you couldn't eat in. So, you know, kind of having that clarity, I think is really, really important. And I don't know, I mean, don't know each specialty. So I'm going to just keep tossing things out, but Maria, I don't want to leave you out. So how can businesses deal with navigating communications with both employees and other stakeholders? Or should I be asking that of somebody else?
No, I think, you know, we've got that question sort of split into two parts. So obviously the communication with their employees and stakeholders. You know, I think the main focus, the overarching thing here is communication. And I think what ends up happening is the first thing to go when, you know, money is tight, and we will talk more in detail about this, is usually the HR piece or the marketing piece of a business. So obviously what ends up happening, particularly with the communication piece, is that person that would typically be communicating within your business has probably been furloughed. So the communication piece is the last thing that businesses are thinking about. And your point about websites, I think it's common that many businesses are still not communicating through either the website or through their social media, or even notices on their business premises. I think letting their, you know, customers, but also what the stakeholders and employees, what they're doing is really, really critical. And I think the employees are a really, really important one, because there is a lot of miscommunication out there with regard to furloughing, with regard to how much they can actually earn, whether they're still going to have a job at the end of this. Is it going to be EI? I know you've touched on it on a few of your webinars, but there is confusing with employees. I think you have to be very clear with your employees as to, you're taking this one day at a time, 1 week at a time, 1 month at a time, and explaining what type of things you're actually doing to keep the business open. And I think with suppliers, it's important that you communicate with them, particularly with, you know, payment dates. And I think the problem is all of us are in this same boat. So open communication to say, look, some money is better than no money. Can you bear with me on this? Can you give me extended credit period? That sort of thing. So I think for an employee and stakeholder, that's what needs to happen. But having someone in your business that's effectively able to communicate that from a communication function is really, really critical. So I'll probably hand over to Candace or Paulette about the customer side of things.
Just one point about employees, Patrick, that businesses are having a little bit of a difficult time sometimes trying to bring their employees back. Sometimes the employees, don't know how the job is going to be changed. They still maybe have a little bit of fear about working in an environment where they may, come up against somebody that has COVID. So some of the hoteliers, hotel managers, what some of them have done is, bring your employee back in and show them what it is you're actually doing. So example, in a hotel or a bed and breakfast where you're actually dealing with housekeeping, which is, as we know, is the #1 labor issue with a hotel. If they can see how you're keeping them safe, then it actually will help allay some of their fears that maybe they will start to come back. And what we're hearing is once the employees come back and start to talk to their fellow employees again, they've missed the social aspect. So now they are starting to want to come back and be able to work with their social group again. So that's one of the ways that you can try to make sure your employees know that you're trying to keep them as safe as possible.
That's great. Paulette, yeah, sorry, go ahead, Maria. Yeah.
I just want to add to that too, which we have talked about internally. Candace talked about the 3 different types of customers. So you'd have on one end of the spectrum, someone that was, very vigilant with mask wearing and, and then you would have someone else that thinks this is all a conspiracy theory. And then you would have the people in the middle that do think, I'm going to be careful and cautious. So I think you have to be able to communicate to your employees and prepare them through training of how to read the customer and realize that training is very, very important, that they need to understand that they are going to get possibly 3 different types of reactions and to be prepared for that, which is something they would never have had to consider before.
Yeah, absolutely. Paul, is there anything you wanted to add to that, or should I jump on to the next question?
I think we're okay to go to the next question.
Okay, great. I did just want to pick up on a part of that. I think you're right, Maria. So often people think marketing is a cost that is discretionary. I mean, given that I started my career at Procter & Gamble a long time ago, I guess my first job kind of taught me that marketing is not discretionary. And in fact, in a time of a pandemic, I mean, I kind of hate to say this, it's an opportunity to actually spend a little bit more than some of your competitors. And it doesn't have to be a lot of money. It just might mean doing things a little bit differently. There's a great quote that somebody gave me recently, and that is, when you're out of sight, you're out of mind. And if you're out of mind, you're out of business. So is it really the right time to cut some of those what may be considered discretionary spends? And again, you can certainly do things a little bit differently, but being one of the voices that people hear at a time when they're not hearing many voices can really put you in a great position when you're coming out of this. I see Paul has asked a question, so I'm going to jump into that. He says, great points about communication directly or across media platforms. Do you have any good examples of hospitality or tourism organizations responding to customer or client requests for feedback? And a follow-up might be, do you have any examples where an organization took employee suggestions and expanded or adapted their services? So again, the first part of that is, do you have any examples of hospitality tourism organizations responding to customer or client requests or feedback? I'm just going to throw that out for somebody.
So we certainly have had, I think the takeaway has been a great response for many restaurants, and a lot of them are now including alcohol as the laws have changed, so people can order food and they can order alcohol that's in a can that can be taken away as part of that. And I think restaurants has really responded to that, and it might have opened up opportunities for people who might not normally, have time to go to the restaurant but still want that food. And I think restaurants, for example, although it is a way of spending discretionary income, it is also a way of feeling a little bit normal. So even if it's the idea of going to the restaurant and getting takeaway, I think that it's definitely something that people have been participating in, and I think that those restaurants that are responding to that need at the moment are being successful with that. We also have some restaurants that are in the city that are doing takeaway kits, for example, and you might have a specialty item that people really enjoy at your restaurant that you can put into a kit and people can take it home and prepare it on the barbecue. And there's a restaurant in the city that's doing that with burgers, for example. There's pizza places that are making that happen for people as well. So I think just being creative at the moment, and various organizations are doing that in different ways. There's also chefs that are, doing online cooking classes, for example, and connecting with customers in that way. I would suggest that maybe bartenders might be able to do the same thing. We're allowed to have small gatherings at the moment, and maybe we can bring a bartender into our homes and make that as an experience as well.
No, those are great points and great examples of trying to maintain that relationship, I think, with the customer. Is there anything, Maria or Candace, you'd like to add to that?
I could add a couple things, Patrick. For large organizations in the accommodation industry, of course, we've got some big companies out there like Marriott, Hilton, etc. So from their nerve centers, I think one of the most heartfelt videos that happened quite quickly within the pandemic was from Arne Sorensen, who's the CEO of Marriott, who very quickly put a video out directly to his associates, telling them exactly the truth. And it was a hard truth that he had to tell, but and you could tell he was quite emotional about it. But he stood up in front of his thousands of associates and basically said, "This is where we are, and this is what's going to happen, and it's going to hurt." So that type of transparency from a leader, and whether you're big or small business, even if you're a small business, I think you have to show that that side of yourself once in a while. That it is a tough situation. Everybody's doing their best. How do you build trust with your customers and your employees is, I think, honesty and integrity. This is the time it really has to be out there.
That's great, and I absolutely agree with you. I think being forthcoming is the best thing you can do. Another question here: do you have any tips on how businesses who haven't really embraced digital marketing with customers online, how can they transition to this new type of marketing and reach out to new consumers through digital marketing? If you have any thoughts on how they could do that.
Yeah, so Google My Business is something that's free to organizations, and it's, when people Google organization, it's one of the first things that comes up. So I think this is an opportunity for people to take advantage of that. It's a free service, and they can promote their business profile using that platform. They can promote their business website. They can have Google posts, respond to reviews, and update their business profiles as well. But there's social media components as well. Maybe I'll let Maria, do you want to talk about social media?
Yeah, I think having there is, particularly managing social media, Hootsuite is a really great tool that allows you to do one post and it will actually go to all of your platforms, which I think for people that are not technology savvy, I think it's probably the easiest way of them getting their message out. But the other thing is, using software on your websites, making sure your website is actually updated with a COVID-19 page so that you can actually post your new hours, you can actually inform your customers. because we're hearing, as you said, Patrick, that people are they're not answering the phones. People have no idea what the operation hours are. They even open? You know, are they planning to open? So I think using what you already have, I think, is the thinking about that. The other thing you can use is a chat box on your website, you know, a live chat box, or you can use a chat bot, which is obviously predetermined responses to people's questions, that is sort of cheap and effective ways that you can actually communicate in this digital era.
Right. Okay. Those are all great suggestions. I'm going to
Patrick,
kind of.
can I ask?
Oh, yeah.
Can I add
Please.
one thing?
Please
You
do.
know, everybody thinks, and it's true. You do. Every business should have a digital presence somewhere. If they don't have a web page, I'm sure there's some inexpensive web page developers that they can at least get started with, and then you just build as you go. The other thing is the good old-fashioned telephone. The more we get into technology, I still think we have this high-tech, high-touch need, that the more we have technology, the more we're on web pages, internet sites, etc. It's really, really nice once in a while to have a human voice at the end of a phone. And I think one of the opportunities a lot of our small businesses have missed is reaching out by a telephone and actually calling one of your clients and your customers to say, this is what we're doing. Just wanted to reach out so you know, when we're thinking of opening, or we're not sure, but we'll keep you updated. I mean, most restaurants, when they take reservations, have telephone numbers, so they do have client data. Most spas, and I'm thinking there's quite a few spas out there that would have their client data. Hairdressers have telephone numbers. Just the sitting down with a telephone and making 5 or 6 calls a day and just touching base in the old-fashioned way.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think those are all great suggestions. I know we've been working with a company, and I'm not trying to promote them by any means, but I know they've got a technology, Simplycast, that enables you to text people. So to your point, Candace, I mean, maybe it's phoning people, but if you have your customers' phone numbers, you could probably do a mass text. And I don't understand what the privacy implications of all of that might be, but a mass text to let people know that you're open, or let people know what your new hours are. Any way to sort of get that communication out there, I suspect, is very, very important. But one of the things people have been concerned about is safety. How can businesses ensure that customers know their location is safe, and the business is safe? Is there something that businesses should be doing to convey that? I suspect it's an area of concern for many of their customers.
Well, I think you have one of your programs out there, Post, which is one way of doing that, and that's taking that pledge, and I know that's a program. It's on your your web page that people can get more information, and it's a way of putting a tag in your window. I mean, we've done it for years with 4-star, 5-star ratings. Let's now let people know that we're sanitizing, cleaning, following all the policies and procedures that we need to. And whether you do it visually on a sign on your door, or on your web page. Some companies have put videos out that say, this is our new cleanliness regime that we're doing. Some of the major hotel companies have actually partnered with some other universities and major companies to make sure that the proper cleaning programs and everything are put into place, and they have that right on their websites, and they're broadcasting that.
Yeah, no, well, that's great, and yes, I didn't want to promote that, but I suppose I should be, which is Post Promise. So I did just put the link up in the chat. I think everyone can see the chat, so you can see the link to the postpromise.com. And what it basically does is it says that you will do 5 things: maintain physical distance, you'll stay home if unwell, you'll practice respiratory etiquette, meaning you'll cough into your elbow or cover your mouth, clean and disinfect regularly, and finally, and most importantly, wash and sanitize your hands. So yeah, I think confidence, is what people need, and I think you're right. Well, thank you for mentioning that. I think the post promise is one of the areas that people can get confidence from businesses, and we're hoping that shortly we'll begin to see that advertised on television with support from the federal government, and even more people will be aware of it. What about some tactical things? So, are there things we can do to utilize outdoor space, or things that people should be thinking about? I remember just a few short months ago, we were talking about accessibility and how in the coming years, all spaces, spaces will need to be accessible. But now, are there other things we can do with our spaces to make them more available, to increase the business size?
So I know for restaurants, depending on the investment that people are able to commit to, people are looking at patios now, and one thing to consider is, are you going to have those patios covered? Are there going to be heaters available? Are they going to be enclosed? Can you provide blankets? And if you do that, those will have to be washed and maybe packaged, like the airlines do. So, what kind of procedures can you put in place to make people feel comfortable, but also extend your season into the fall, because we do live in Nova Scotia and the weather, does get cool for sure. Maybe people can also you might be able to do some special things on your patio, for example, as well. So having a special drink on your patio, making that experience a little bit more enticing for people. So Maria, did you?
Yeah, I think utilizing outdoor space, some of the other things we've seen is some restaurants offering like picnic lunches that they can use as a sort of new marketing, as an opportunity of a new product. Also, we talked about Dine Arounds, creating maybe partnerships within it's, Alexander Keys Brewery with a little restaurant to do an appetizer, with someone else to do the main, and creating that network of partnerships that could create a new experience using outdoor spaces.
Well, I think that's an amazing idea. In fact, I love the Dine Around concept, and I think just again getting Dine Around in place so that so that people can. I know in surveys with their members, many people have not yet gone back out and not yet gone to restaurants, even though in Nova Scotia we have very low. I was able to say no for a little while, but now I'm back to low number of cases. So I think anything we can do to encourage people to get out, and I love the Dine Around concept. Now we have sent a letter, I will sort of put it out there, to Minister McClellan from the Chamber of Commerce and from the Restaurant Association and from the Hotel Association, suggesting that government could support Dine Around at least for a couple of weeks in July or August, to encourage people to get back out and to help support restaurants to get back to some sense of normalcy. I know it's not normal, but some sense of normalcy. I wanted to just address a couple of the questions. Kayla has mentioned, don't forget, if you're in the chat, to address your message to panelists and all attendees so everyone can see. Maria Keynes has mentioned that loyalty marketing is a great way to keep your customers informed of the protocols. So gathering, I suspect, their email addresses and keeping them up to date is really, really important. It enables you to connect with your customers. Cyril has said there's also a Stay Safe program between the Hotel Association of Canada and the American Hotel and Lodging Association that is accessible to all hoteliers. So that's pretty easy. I actually joined the Hotel Association by just signing up for their newsletter. So I'm now a member of the Hotel Association of Canada, and they didn't ask me for any money, but they do continue to send me. They do continue to send me great information. So there is lots of great information, I think, that people can get out there. I see a message.
also, Patrick, has a Cleaning It Right free training program. our Tourism
Oh, okay.
Industry Association of Nova Scotia. It's on their website. I believe it's called Cleaning It Right, and it's a free program.
Okay, great. Okay, well, again, encourage people to look at that. Corey has asked a question in the Q&A. Just remind everybody about the Q&A. It says a lot of businesses and industries were using live events to connect with customers, but in light of restricted numbers for gatherings, are you aware of any opportunities for smaller events to help leverage small businesses and create valuable customer experiences? And I want to stay with that question, but remind people that gathering sizes have been increased in the last little while in Nova Scotia. So if you're a business and you're in the business of events, you can have up to, I think, 200 people now physically distant. It's not the same, but again, is there, in the light of restricted, back to the question, in the light of restricted numbers for gatherings, are you aware of any opportunities for smaller events to help leverage small businesses and create valuable customer experiences? Have you seen anything like that?
We're starting to see some smaller weddings that are happening. So the wedding planners that for a while had no business are now starting to see some light at the end of the tunnel, and so they're able to kind of pull together some unique wedding experiences. And of course, in Nova Scotia, if weather holds, a lot of weddings, they like to be outdoors. And I know the general manager of White Point Resort, so, is having weddings. So the resorts in the rural areas, because of space, can really start to have those group gatherings, make it quite unique. One of the large events I don't know how large it is yet, but the Cavendish Beach Conference is now a drive-in event. We saw churches starting doing that. And so now we're seeing drive-ins using that for conferencing, for concerts. So the cars are, allowed in one at a time. They have to be physically distanced. You have to stay within your car. You tune into the music through your radio, but you still have those live people up on stage in front of you. So that's just a couple of ones that I've heard about.
Oh, that's great. Is there anything, Maria or Paulette, you'd like to add to that? No? Okay, I'm going to keep going then. I do want to mention, and Kayla mentioned to me privately, that as a chamber, we're actually beginning to look at outdoor events again. And we plan to have an event at the end of July or the first week of August. I may have the date wrong. That will be one of our business after hours events, and we will be able to host again. Our plan is to do it outdoors, and as Jeff has mentioned, you can now do up to 250 people outdoors, physically different, physically distanced. Sorry, it will be different, but it'll be distanced. I see Kim has posted the Clean It Right program as well in the Q&A, so you can get the link to that directly. I guess a question for perhaps all three of you: are there new opportunities being created from this crisis? Sort of new products, processes, or markets at this time that you've heard of?
I think what's happening is, because we need to remember that some tourism businesses were completely reliant on non-resident. So until the Canadian bubble opens, until the US border opens, until the international flights are coming back in, there's a lot of tourism businesses there that are really, 2020 seems to be put on hold. So they're having to really reinvent the wheel. They're going to have to relook at other markets, potentially the domestic market of the Atlantic bubble right now, and then obviously opening up to the Canadian market. So what we're seeing is those types of operations are looking at trying to develop new niche product that they can customize to the domestic market. For instance, someone like a tour operator like Atlantic Tours, that would typically be taking people out of Nova Scotia, are now looking at actually utilizing the domestic market that's currently in Atlantic Canada bubble and doing like day trips to the valley and things like that with social distancing on their buses. So that's a market that they hadn't tapped into before. So this is allowing them to do very innovative things because, out of survival, I guess, but it forces them to think very, very differently.
Right. Yeah. Candace, is there anything you'd like to add to that?
Yeah, I think in the hotel bed and breakfast market, one of the innovative ideas I heard was some of the hotels were actually turning their bedrooms into temporary offices so that some people who couldn't work at their office and needed some time to get out of the house, maybe due to daycare, children, just not having an office setup, could actually through a day rate use the space at the hotel. So they would basically, you know, take a room down, make sure a desk was there, whatever was needed. And at least that was the kind of an innovative source. It started by, I think, a minister at a church who just needed quiet time to put a sermon together and said, I just need, I need some space. Asked a local hotel if he could use their room. And they thought, well, if he needs it, maybe there's others out there who have that need. I mean, not all of us have a nice working space from home. So hotels have been could be innovative that way. Also, merchandising can be a big area. And I know Paulette with food and beverage merchandising can be a big important part there. But, you know, the West End for years had always sold this heavenly bed. And so, you know, hotels do have things that could be merchandise, whether it's linen, towels, you know, there are some items that, again, it's being creative and thinking, again, with this, you know, in-homing instinct that people are trying to build up their homes to be as comfortable as possible is, you know, what can you give those people in their homes that'll make them more comfortable? What products do you have to offer?
Yeah, I think that's an excellent example, and I think of some of the downtown offices and businesses that I've spoken to in the last little while, some of the law firms and some of the accounting firms, and they've said they're unable to bring everyone back because they can't maintain the physical distancing required. Maybe they should be speaking to the people at the Marriott downtown, close by, about getting some of those rooms and opening up some of the rooms on a floor. And maybe that could be another wing for McGinnis Cooper downtown. It's an
And I see
interesting.
Jeff Ransom just came in there on our Q&A
Well,
saying,
there's a
yes, that's
reason
a
I
really
picked.
good
Yeah.
idea.
Oh, did he? Okay. There you go. Okay. There you go. So a new floor. Well, we'll put you in touch, Jeff. Uh,
But it would
it-
also augment their food and beverage. If you have a captured audience, they're going to have lunch and coffee breaks and things elsewhere. So it really
that's
could
true.
be a revenue producer plus parking. So I mean, yeah, you could really ramp this up.
Yeah, no, that's true. That's true. Okay, well, we'll have to talk with Jeff after the session. What staff training is required, or are we seeing increased staff training required to kind of meet some of the guidelines that across some of these locations? And I
So I
guess,
think,
sorry, yeah, go ahead, Paulette.
yeah, I think in terms of restaurants probably accommodations as well, people are looking to see that your businesses are being kept safe. So making sure that that staff are trained how to do the cleaning, but also, although our organizations in accommodation and food and beverage have always been, you know, that's been a very important part of their work all the time. Doing it in front of the customer, I think, is somewhat new, and so making sure that we're doing that on a regular basis is important. Rand's actually had in their reopening guidelines, they had assigning a team member on your staff to keep people up to date as to what was happening, you know, day to day. So every day have somebody in charge of educating your team on what's happening within your organization. I think that's important. Things are happening very quickly, and so making sure that your team is up to date on what's happening in terms of training internally is and having a go-to person is a good idea.
So we've seen the Atlantic bubble open up only very recently. Is there a way, and I'm thinking of the fall and winter, is there a way to extend the tourism season in Nova Scotia or in Atlantic Canada to try and take advantage of that bubble, which was closed for so long, to at least get people to take advantage? We talked about patios, but are there other things businesses could do to extend the season?
think staying open is the big thing, Patrick.
Yeah.
We've always had issues with, going into, November and, people and hearing people saying, well, I'm not going there because nothing's open. I think hopefully we've gone through that stage where people realize we have extended our fall business into probably November, December. We will always have the challenge of weather. But again, it's maintaining information, communication on those websites that you're open, what facilities you have. Have you created some special activities within your area? From picture taking of colored leaves to, local music to whatever it might be. Again, as Maria mentioned, partnershiping, I think, is something that people can do. Especially if you want to get people into rural areas. So if a couple of businesses can put their heads together, create activities, start to draw some people into that area, then I think, that's one way of doing it. And I just wanted to mention Best Western also has put a motivator out there for people that are traveling, because they know that car travel, the rubber tire trade, is going to be one of the first ones to come back. So if you stay a night at a Best Western, you actually get a $25 gasoline card.
Oh, okay. Well, that's a good incentive. Well, I'm going to get on to incentives now. Is there something that we think, and maybe it's supports, let's put it that way. Are there supports that are still needed from all levels of government? And if you, I'm going to put you a bit on the spot and ask you to be a little specific if you can be.
I think to the staycation theme that we're talking about, I know that the 4 provinces are really aggressively trying to support businesses with marketing dollars right now in the tourism sector. The ones that are actively going to be promoting staycation traffic, which right now that's what we have with the Atlantic bubble. But I think more can be done. And to the previous question, talking about extending the season, I think government, the Department of Tourism, needs to take that staycation message and maybe have that extending the season message as well, tying in at the same time to try and get people to shift from there was no spring travel, so let's put it on the other end. And I think the marketing dollars that need to come to support the tourism industry needs to continue, and we need to make sure that the pressure is kept on with all efforts, whether it be Destination Canada, TIAC, and our provincial PMOs as well.
Right. Anybody else want to jump in on supports?
I would say for the restaurant industry, there's been concerns about rental agreements and those kinds of things. So I think government support in that way, and we've got some organizations, Restaurants Canada, brands that are supporting our operators locally. But if we could see some assistance in that way, it would be great.
Yeah, and just to pick up on that, I mean, so long as the state of emergency exists in Nova Scotia, evictions are not allowed. Having said that, the state of emergency, and it'll likely continue, the state of emergency is renewed every 2 weeks. So it might be nice to have a bit more security than every 2 weeks. I will say that, the letter that I mentioned, we at the Chamber and the Restaurant Association, the Hotel Association, specifically asked for 3 things. We asked for an accommodation tax credit of $1,000 to encourage people to travel in Nova Scotia. We asked for what they had done in Wuhan, China, which was actually a coupon that you could buy at a discounted rate. So you could buy a coupon for $50, but it had a value of $100 that you could use for restaurants or accommodations. And then we asked for some support for restaurants, for perhaps a Dine Around concept to get people going back out again. So all of these things were very specific. I know the government has only used up half of their reopening grant at about $9 million. So that's another $9 million burning a hole in their pocket that I think they still need to invest, because we're now down to less than 90 days left if you think of a July, August, September tourism market. So it's time to spend that money. I know there's a lot of money spent, but I'll be clear that we've asked government, and we're hoping for a response, because we believe that tactical initiatives are really important. I see a question from an anonymous attendee at the bottom, which is, for tourism businesses that have relied on non-local, so perhaps outside of Atlantic Canada, is there a way to reach new local Atlantic bubble customers and perhaps do it in a hurry?
Maria, you were talking about those companies.
I think again, going back to the destination marketing organisations and the PMOs, so the provincial marketing organisation, I think they are the ones that need to be in the driving seat to try and drive that business. There are a number of businesses in Nova Scotia that completely rely on that non-resident market that are, really finding it very difficult. And Nova Scotia right now it seems to be the tourism industry is one of the provinces that is not being supported financially with the subsidy for this industry. And I know they're scrambling to try and come up, because other provinces have introduced, grants to tourism businesses just to get them through so they can keep their doors open for 2021. But I think the province could be doing, maybe it's an ad campaign, using, TV, radio. I think we need to be giving support, from a provincial level to these businesses so that they can reach the domestic client that they typically wouldn't have had access to in previous, with a call to action, so that, the province can actually marry up the supply and the demand side.
Okay. Candace, did you want to add to that, or was that?
Yeah, no, I think Maria's right, but I think again it's back to having to really be creative and brainstorm and partnerships if possible to increase what your offerings are, because a lot of us, we are looking at trying to find activities because we've been cooped up for quite a while, and if something really attractive to us, we will pay for that, because we haven't paid for travel for a long time, so we probably have some money there to be able to spend. But again, I think if a couple of businesses put their heads together and say, what could we create that the domestic market would be interested in, and it doesn't have to be spectacular. It can just be a fun, unique event, whether I could be sitting with chefs in a farmer's field somewhere, having a great dinner with 20 other people. It could be that simple, but it's creating, again, those experiences. And we've always been pushing on creating experiences in Nova Scotia to drive tourism. I think now we have to create experiences and try to get our local people involved in it.
Well, and we should support that. I think we've kind of alluded to non-traditional partners here during the conversation as well. We have a mailing list at the Chamber of Commerce for that goes to 5,000 people on a weekly basis, and we take ads in our newsletter. So why don't I commit to everybody who's watching that and we do charge for that. I will acknowledge, but it's $250 an ad. But why don't I cut that by 50%? If anybody has an offer that they would like to provide to our 5,000 recipients, we're happy to do that in the next couple of weeks, a travel offer. Although I would make it an incentive. Like, don't just say come to, and I'm going to pick on Jeff, sorry, Jeff, but don't just say come to the Marriott, but come to the Marriott for something. Maybe it's a special on the patio and stay overnight. Or maybe it's if there's somebody listening from Lunenburg, come and get a free breakfast with your stay. I don't think it has to be huge, but I think you need to provide a bit of an incentive. So we'll provide an incentive and reduce the cost to half. And if anybody would like to write to me, or Kayla will put up an email address, maybe we'll do that, at the president at Halifax Chamber. If you'd like to write to me and you can't afford even the $125, just tell us. And we'll put an ad in our newsletter for the next couple of weeks to, again, let's try to get some communication out to people on some of the great offers from some of the operators that are probably listening right now. So we're running out of time. So I wanted to ask what further advice you may have, each of you, I suppose, to members of the tourism and hospitality sector as we continue to get through this.
I think one thing we have to, we talked about training staff. We talked about keeping the place safe. We've talked about, you know, communicating, having a digital presence out there and keeping it updated. I think on a more personal level, we also have to, you know, be aware of people are in different forms of mind about this COVID, and we kind of have to be, you know, we often hear the ads of being kind to each other, but we also have to make sure that our employees have the ability, as was mentioned, to deal with people that are in different phases of mind. And what we have started to see a little bit out there is we know the anxiety levels can be high in some areas, but we're starting to see an intolerance and loss of patience with wait times. So now it seems that everything we have to do, we have to wait. If I go to Costco, I'm in a lineup. If I go to a grocery store, I may be in a lineup. If I go to a restaurant, I may have to wait. I wait, you know, wait times have just been extended. So I think training staff they really have to be aware that they are going to be dealing with people that are in different frames of mind, and tolerance is really going to have to be worked on out there, I think.
That's great. A couple of quick things, Maria.
Yeah, I think this is, you know, this is an opportunity. Try and be positive. Look at this as an opportunity to look at your current business model and to evaluate it, you know, wholeheartedly, to say, is there an opportunity for new products, for more creativity? Is there an opportunity for that local market or various markets that you hadn't typically been engaging? Look at scaling back on some of your products. We're seeing this in the restaurant industry. They're redesigning their menu items, obviously, so that it cuts down on what their expenses are for products and things like that. But use this time wisely. And I think you have to, it's hard sometimes. You tend to procrastinate when you're in a crisis, but use this time wisely to really look at what the opportunities are.
That's great. Thank you. Great advice. Paulette.
So I would say, back on the communication part, to make sure that your communication is purposeful and that you take advantage of those items that are less expensive to you right now, especially if you haven't done that in the past, and keep them going. So make sure what you're sending out to your customers is telling them something that they want to hear about. And, you know, don't forget about the value that your employees bring to your business and some of the ideas that they might have. They're your internal customers, and they might be able to help you with some of your planning and visioning for your business models as well.
That's great. Okay, thank you very much, Paulette. And thank you all for your comments and thoughts today. I know I didn't touch on, I did see some comments in the chat. I didn't mention all of them, but you know, do agree that loan guarantees are critical, and would encourage the folks from Ambassador Tours Grey Line to maybe talk to the folks at ECOA who still have some cash left in their RRRF program, and those are bigger dollars. So you know, would encourage them to look at that. And I wholeheartedly again agree with Jeff, and we do need to get people back to our offices or back to their offices safely, so that businesses downtown can be supported, and so that people feel again confident that they can return to their offices safely. And securely. And I don't want to leave out Maria Keynes, who said how important, again, loyalty marketing is for increasing trust. So, you know, ensure that when you're speaking to people, you're communicating to your loyal customers, and try to create more of those loyal customers by gathering those email addresses. I want to reiterate the offer I just made, which is, you know, we're happy to do an ad in our 5,000 person newsletter. I'm hoping that would work out to some business for some people, and we'll half our price, which I think is 125. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure it's 125. Kayla has said that she will include that offer in the follow-up email, and she'll include the person that will actually do the work, and that's Abby, rather than me. So she'll include Abby's email if people would like to reach out to her directly. So thank you very much to Candace, Paulette, and Maria. Thank you very much for joining us today, and thank you for your help and your support to the tourism industry. Really appreciate the input, and you know, we'll be pleased to see you on a patio near me soon. Okay, thanks everybody, and thanks to all of our listeners today. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you
Bye-bye.
for having us.
Bye.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye.